thank you for that introduction. Because yes, it's true that a lot of people started searching for God, for meditation, prayer. They wanted to understand this and explore it further. And I see that the stress and materialism that existed just prior to COVID was extreme. And so people were really exhausted and worn out, I think. And so I think that COVID came at a time when everybody was just running too fast. And so COVID meant that things could slow down a little. I'm totally aware of the negative impact on society of COVID-19, but I'm also looking at the optimistic side. And I'm thinking about how COVID-19 gave people breathing space again. Just think about the time spent in commuting. In London, it's a minimum of an hour a day. And of course, for some people, it's 2 hours a day. And so 4 hours a day, every single day. Can you imagine how many hours of my life gets lost in that? And of course, the hustle and the bustle and the huge population, the pollution, everything is mixed up in all of that. And so here, suddenly, now you weren't able to go out, not even to work. Maybe you were able to work from home and you considered yourself fortunate to be able to have a job. But also, it just gave time to spend with family. You know, I know of families where the young ones have to make appointments with their parents to have dinner together. Or sometimes it's the parents chasing the young ones to make time to have dinner with them. So it's crazy things like this. The ones who are the closest to us, the nearest and the dearest to us, we found that we actually haven't given them a lot of our time and attention. And so this space opened up not only to search for God and spirituality and meditation and prayer, but also to discover and re-engage in relationships within my own nuclear home, my family. And so I think that that was a huge, huge plus. And again, I know the downsides of domestic violence and the things that happened there, but the majority would probably say that it gave us time to rediscover ourselves. It gave us time to be with our family. It gave us time to step back, reflect, and think about what it is we were doing. Because, you know, otherwise sometimes, you know, we don't use that image so much nowadays. We used to be used a lot, the rat race. And the rats are racing and going round and round on the wheel and not able to stop. They can't get off, they can't make the wheel stop, and they're just caught up with it. So sometimes human beings felt a little bit the same. And now the wheel was stopped by external forces that nobody could argue with. And you had to be at home to be safe, to keep your loved ones safe. Of course, also a word of appreciation and great gratitude to all the frontline workers, whether it was the medical staff, the medical teams, whether it was the pharmacist, whether it was the housekeeping staff, or the police. There are so many, the journalists, all these people are people who didn't stay at home. They were out there working, serving and helping. And I know we acknowledged them at that point in different ways, but yet still a word of thanks to them are due even now. So people began to appreciate the setup that we have. You know, today we see some countries and we realize how fortunate the UK is. Our NHS has been brilliant and they've served with such love and dedication. So appreciation, gratitude, these were the things that were coming up very strongly. I know that our own center supplied food to a number of people who live on their own, and there was no way they could manage to look after themselves. And so we had a team of volunteers who would be cooking, but also a team of volunteers would go out and supply them. And meditation, of course, continued online, and more people joined us wanting to find out more. So stop. just for a moment and look inside and see what's going on within. And maybe you discover the more important aspects of life. You thought you could have happiness outside, and you discovered it was something within. You thought that love was being able to express going shopping and buying things, and you couldn't do that anymore. And so you had to find a different way of expressing yourself. And probably it was more appreciated than another gift. And so, yes, we began to find solace in our own inner spiritual values. And so there has to be an upside to everything. I think that we hadn't realized how dependent we were on eating out, for example, or going to the cinema or theatre. And of course, London is full of all of these attractions and distractions and temptations, and great while we have them. But when I don't have them, do I have inner resources to draw upon? Do I have the capacity within to be able to manage myself? And a very important ingredient within the whole story of the pandemic has been the subject of fear. If I have fear, then of course the thing that I'm most afraid of is probably going to happen to me. My thoughts, my energy are going to attract it and make it happen. But also what we didn't realize was that anxiety, worry, and fear are the things that actually destroy our immune system. And so some people began to understand this and try to find ways to go beyond their fear. And they realized that going on an inner journey, making that effort to connect with the self and the one above, was the way to be able to overcome stress, overcome fear, and to be able to face life with equanimity. And of course, it's not necessary that everyone who had COVID died. It's not true. Yes, I'm very aware of the bereavement that families faced and of the challenges that people had. And of course, now the scene in India is a very sad one. But we were lucky here. People were sensible and people managed to stay indoors and stay healthy and wash their hands and follow all those guidelines. But I think mostly there was a lot of information being given at all times. And so information and knowledge is power. And so people learned that, no, mustn't be afraid. Just take the right steps to be able to fill yourself with that conviction that things will work out, it will be well, follow the guidelines, but don't let fear get the better of you. And so even today, I would say that this is a message for us for the future. If I've prepared myself spiritually inside and I have that resilience and capacity, then I'm going to be able to manage whatever the circumstances may come in front of me. You know, there's a period that humanity goes through, which is a dark patch. But beyond the dark patch, the sun always appears, the dawn breaks and the day begins. And so there's a period of light after that. And I feel that COVID has pushed us to darkness, and our own understanding of life at a deeper level with a sense of purpose and meaning will make life more meaningful, filled with that inner enlightenment, but also the awareness of how we can manage life in a better way in the future.
Yes, I mean, you mentioned the challenge of fear, and I guess for a lot of people, you know, fear is something that hits you. It's kind of like you didn't realize that you were relying on certain circumstances and situations until things changed. And then once they change, okay, you know, possibilities of hope or fear within the context of change. But you mentioned the immune system, and there's this whole field in medicine called psychoneuroimmunology, which is all about that link between the consciousness and state of consciousness and the immune system. But also, because what happens then is there are floods of chemicals in the body, you know, whether it's adrenaline, cortisol, these things that kind of take the experience of self into a state of negativity. So for people who've not maybe practiced some form of inner strengthening practice over time, what can people do when they find themselves caught up in a situation where those emotions kick in?
I think it's very important to know that there's a lot of help available, and definitely meditation is a method to be used, especially to overcome all the negative feelings and emotions. So, and there's many offers of meditations online at the moment. And so pick and choose, and probably the one that is free is the one that's more spiritual than all the others. It's a very generalized statement I'm making, but it means that that place exists to serve, not to make money. So that's a very clear assumption one can make from that. And if there's a hefty price tag, then I have a question. Can you bottle it in a package and sell it? Meditation and all of these things. So choose the meditation you would like to do. Or maybe there are other self-development techniques and methods I would prefer to experiment with. Maybe mindfulness is something I want to do. I might even want to go to a counselor. So the important thing is not to feel completely helpless and in a state of bondage where I feel, well, I'm lost and there's nobody out there to help me. And technology has played an amazing part in giving people that support and help at all times through this whole period. So find out the nearest, the best place, and connect with them, and they'll tell you when they have their courses and so on. And maybe if it's the right moment, if you feel, we could even have a few minutes of meditation now, so people can see how easy it is. Because sometimes, you think, oh, meditation, that's not for me. I'm not into that. But a Raj Yoga meditation that we practice is very simple. And so should we try that?
Yeah, could you do that in the context of, this is probably me speaking from going back, to my experience 30 years ago, in the context of people whose mind is very active, tends to be very active. And therefore, when they try and sit to meditate, they may be listening to someone guide them, as you will do in a moment, but their thoughts are going, am I doing this right? And all that kind of stuff that happens internally, which each individual, some people just kind of, my wife sort of was able to do it like that. But, a lot of us, I think, have that challenge of a very active mind that is questioning all the time. So perhaps you could factor that in the context, if we just spend a few moments experiencing that.
Sure. And what I'm going to suggest is I'll actually speak out my thoughts as I meditate, which means that it'll give you an idea of what sort of thoughts you can have. So we're not trying to tell you to do the impossible, which is stop thinking. It can't work like that. But we're just suggesting, instead of letting your thoughts go around and back and up and down, just try channeling that energy in a specific way. And it might even help you to keep your eyes open and focus on that point of light that you see in front of you. So let's begin. And you don't have to sit on the floor. You don't have to stand on your head. Just sit comfortably wherever it is you are. And so let the body sit relaxed, easy, but alert. Your back straight so that you stay absolutely balanced. And now I go to the center of my forehead and I visualize a spark of light. And I have a question. Is it really possible that this energy that I can experience inside my head, is it really separate from this physical body of mine? Let me experiment and feel it. And I go deeper and deeper within my own inner world. And there's a layer of thinking. I go deeper than that. there's a layer of experience. I go deeper than that. And I come to that sacred space within. This is where I, the inner being, the soul, reside. Stable in this awareness, I can feel my separate existence to this physical form. I, the soul, have a body, but the body cannot say that it has a soul. I, the one using this body, the master of this amazing vehicle, I can identify this and say this. And going deeper within, I realize that I can connect with my own space within, and within a moment, reconnect with all my treasures. Come back to the awareness of the physical dimension, but see if you can keep your thoughts in that higher consciousness, the consciousness of soul, rather than jumping back into age and gender and race and religion, etc., etc. Just stay in that awareness of the inner being, this point of light, and see if you can make that transition from just physical consciousness to spiritual consciousness. Thank you.
Could you say something about how one can develop the capacity to use technology in a positive way, but maybe also reduce the downside, or maybe protect oneself against some of these less, more negative, less positive influences?
Jeff, it's a general state of the world at the moment, and technology is, of course, a very major part of it. But even if you were to remove technology, there'd still be a huge amount of anger and greed and ego and all of these things driving us and motivating us. And so technology is one aspect, but can I look at the bigger picture? And I see that in terms of the bigger picture, why there is so much negativity is because we've forgotten ourselves. We lost touch with ourselves. We forgot we were spirit. We came into matter. We came into skin. And that is the root cause of the evil that we are surrounded by. And it didn't come automatically. It came from us. I became angry. My children saw that. They learned to be angry. And at work, I realize if I raise my voice and I'm angry, people will sit up and take note. If I speak to them softly, maybe they won't. So all of this has escalated to the point where it's at a very dangerous peak. And then within all of this comes social media and generally technology. But you see, all these things that exist can either be highly beneficial or they can be very damaging. And it depends on human consciousness, which way things will go. If I choose to use social media, well, I can give a lot of people a message of peace. I can make a lot of people aware that if they go within, they can find that peace and they can generate that peace and be instruments for peace to help many, many others, and even perhaps bring war to a halt. If there are enough of us reaching a point of critical mass, peace can come in the world. But equally, there's all the negativity that's triggering the negativity that I carry within myself. And secondly, it's become fashionable. You know, it seems that if you do negative things, you'll create a ripple and people will be interested, like the car crash you mentioned. And if there's something good that's happening, people will poo-poo it and say, oh, well, okay, well, let them get on with it. Nothing to do with me. And so how do I regulate what's happening to me? How do I monitor even? Well, let me educate myself. Let me understand more deeply the impact of all of this on me. And the more I try to understand what's going on, I see how my negativity pulls me in a specific way, and then society is going to feed that. And so it just gets worse and worse and worse. We get caught up in all sorts of addiction cycles, whether it's phoning friends across in the USA and it's midnight my time, and even 4 o'clock becomes my normal time to go to bed. And so what's going to be my condition the rest of the day? So social media, of course, the wonderful advantages, but also the negativity. If I allow it to overpower me, if I choose to use it as an instrument for good, amazing things can happen. But if I allow the negativity to take over, then whatever it is I have, whether it's, you know, a whiteboard or a blackboard or a piece of paper, I'm going to use that for communicating messages that are not very useful. I remember very specifically, it was in 2016 that fake news started, and we started to talk about post-truth. We'd never heard that term before that, but it suddenly came about. And I'm sure social media had a lot to making it spread around. So we are in a very different era now. And my own experience is that the more I'm aware of my own inner identity, the less I'm able to be influenced in a negative way by the things outside. If I maintain my own self-respect and my own inner dignity, I can hold my own and not be swamped by all of these things that are going on around. And of course, spirituality is the way in which we can go within, find out what's going on, and also receive the tools with which to be able to create positive change within myself. So I can go back to the innocence that I experienced as a child without falling into the trap of being as naive as a child, but that innocence in which I didn't see color as a different thing. Whether somebody was brown or white or green, it didn't matter. If they were my friends, I was connecting with them. And then somewhere along the line, that innocence got destroyed. Can I come back to that innocence of seeing each one as my spiritual family, so that I'm not creating blocks for myself and creating blocks for others and discriminating against others? So this is a spiritual journey to go on. And this is what gives me optimism for the future, that if I can bring about change within myself, together as a human family, we can definitely bring about positive change in the world also.
I'd like to just go a little bit deeper into that, because you mentioned fake news, and yes, you know, maybe the mentions in the news of fake news began in 2016, but I suppose one of the things that is now becoming apparent is how much bias and you know, how much agenda there was there already. And I mean, literally in the last 24 hours, you know, Prince William has been on TV talking about the deceitful way in which the BBC, you know, the great institution that's been admired all around the world for decades, for being impartial and for being honest and for being straightforward with things, you know, to call them deceitful in the treatment of his mother. And it does create this kind of concern in people about, well, what can I trust? And I know you mentioned just now, you know, that developing that kind of sense of an inner guidance, maybe an inner resourcefulness, an inner clarity, the ability to see the truth for the self that is right for the self. Could you say a little bit more about getting to there? Because I think we have relied so much on external sources to give us guidance and to be our touchstones and our, the places that we go to get what we regard as valid information.
It's true that all this negativity and fake news existed long before 2016. Absolutely correct. And I was very fascinated by this at one point. When I was in India, I was reading the local news there about a particular situation. And then I was also switching on to the international news just for 3 minutes, radio. It was radio in those days. This would have been in the 80s. And there was such a contrast between what I was reading in local terms and how the reporting was happening on an international basis. And so that's when my trust broke. And I realized that you had to be very, very clear in what it is you could perceive and what it is you could take for granted, instead of just that blind faith that, yes, because it's in print or because it's in a particular channel, it has to be true. Because I was seeing the evidence that there was a lot of camouflage, there was a lot of deceit going on in the reporting of the events that I was reading about. So how to develop this inner compass? When I'm meditating, what I'm doing is letting the world outside stay outside, and I'm going deeper within myself. And at the depth and the core of the being, for every human being, there is peace, truth, love, purity, and joy. This is without exception. Every human being carries these qualities in their own inner being. But of course, with all the lack of awareness that I've had for some time, and the only awareness that I'm fed all the time in this day and age is that related to the external, the body. So I lose touch with myself, and I begin to believe that, yes, age makes a big difference, that gender is very difficult to deal with, that race and religion are of course going to divide you. And so this is the information that we are fed all the time. And we lose touch with ourselves, and we forget about that inner compass of peace and truth that can guide us through life. And meditation means I'm stepping away from the things out there for just a few minutes, going within, finding that inner peace, and allowing those positive attributes to emerge. And I very consciously haven't spoken about God so far, but I believe I have to mention it here. One step of meditation is to be able to know myself. The other step is to be able to connect with the divine. And my understanding of the divine is very simple. The being of light, that image that I referred to earlier, that universal concept of light that comes in all the traditions through all the ages in different ways, but light is at the heart of all the things. And so focusing on that is not just a point of light, but I'm actually, that inner being, the light, am connecting with the divine light, the supreme. And I can actually have a relationship of love and joy and peace, connecting with that being. And please do find out more about this whenever you're ready to hear more about that. But seeing that so many more people are finding out about God through Google, it's worth letting you know that there is a very simple way to recognize the divine and make contact with the divine. If I begin my day putting the compass straight to true north, and I'm starting the day with that experience of peace, of truth and love, then it's more likely that I'm going to be guided by these things in my life. Otherwise, I do things through the influence of negativity from outside, my friends or the media or something or another. And there's something knocking away inside, but I don't know what to do about it. And I'm at odds with myself. My conscience is telling me something, but my activity in my life out there is something else. And so it's really important to align both of these. You know, when we talk about peace of mind, maybe everything was quiet at home. Maybe you had time to do your work, you had time to help with the housework, you were able to look after the children, but still there was something that was missing. There wasn't that experience of inner contentment and fulfillment. And when I go into the depth and my conscience, my behavior are aligned together, and I'm able to discover these inner treasures that lie within, then I find the fulfillment that I was looking for, the contentment that I was seeking. And so I start the day with contentment and fulfillment, and it's more likely that through the day, I won't be distracted by greed of acquiring more than I need. I won't be pulled away by attractions and attachments, but I'll be able to maintain my own equilibrium. So starting the day well is a very important thing, and also the right company. And of course, through videos online, we can have excellent, good company, but also the things that I'm reading. What am I reading? Is it uplifting for me? Or is it something that's pulling me down further into negativity? What am I watching? What are the images that I'm imprinting on my own inner world? I see a movie of violence at night, or even a TV serial of violence, and those images are there. And those images, A, will not let me sleep comfortably, but also when I awaken next morning, those images will guide me into the wrong track. And definitely the images that we see, the sounds that we hear, have a huge impact on our behavior through the day. And I think most people are now aware of this. And so let me very consciously choose the company that I'm giving myself through materials that I read and see and hear and so on. And so if I take care of what I'm doing in the morning, I feed my mind some nourishing material, something that's uplifting and spiritual, then that's going to support me through the day. My mind will keep coming back to that, so that then this is what is guiding me.
So just to follow a line of thinking here, if, let's say, someone listening this evening, watching this evening, is thinking, actually, you know what, I think this meditation would be a good thing for me to try. And so they try, and they have maybe some of the experience I was alluding to before your little meditation earlier, which is their mind is all over the place, and they start telling themselves, I don't think I know how to do this. And maybe, you know, they go off and Google what's the best-selling book on meditation or something, and so they, you know, just accumulate more and more information about it. So they can talk well about meditation but not actually do it. I think there's another aspect to this as well, which is, and I think you just touched on it, with the impressions that we've taken on board already are in there somewhere in the back of the mind. And so maybe when we do sit to meditate, we may have an understanding, we may start with a belief that yes, there is something really positive and good at the core of the human being, at the core of myself. But actually what I discover as I start to meditate is stuff comes up from inside that maybe doesn't look quite so pleasant and doesn't appear, and I might think, oh no, this really isn't for me. This is either not working or I don't really like what I'm finding in there. Could you speak to that a little? Because I think many people this evening will have had some of that experience themselves.
Sure. Usually what happens when we begin to meditate, for the first little while, once I've learned to just calm my mind down, it's quite usual to have very beautiful experiences. is like the carrot that moves me on my journey. This is what I've found quite often. But then once you've started your journey, it's then that you begin to discover what's going on inside. And yes, those original qualities are definitely there. And in meditation, you've had a glimpse of them, you've had an experience of them, but then other things begin to surface. And what you have to do at that time is study spiritual teachings that will explain how to deal with these things. And so it's not just, a sort of course of meditation in 3 hours and that's it, and off you go. Yes, of course.
On your
smartphone. So, yes, of course, you can meditate on your own, but if you're connected with a family, a spiritual family, there'll be many others who've been through the same journey who can give you their experience and help you with their own journey also, and show you how they were able to traverse that particular path. There's a lot of information that one can have about what's going on inside. And it's, like when you put things in the washing machine, then things go whirring around, but the dust is coming out, the clothes are getting cleaned. And so, yes, I might be going through a bit of a whirlpool at some point, but it's part of the cleansing. And to continue with that faith that that goodness is definitely there, and to continue with your meditation so that then you're constantly exposed to God's light and love and taking benefit from that also. If it was a journey I was trying to do on my own, it would be very difficult. But two things make it easier: the company that I have, the family that I'm connected with, the spiritual family, but most of all, help from above. What I've noticed is that if I begin to have an experience of the divine, and I know that that being does exist, I begin to develop faith. And faith isn't something that happens just like that. But I've understood something, I've experimented with it, and now I'm experiencing it. And I have faith. So let me nurture that faith, because the power of faith is what's going to keep me going through the turbulence of what's going on within me. And to expect that, it's been a long journey since I was pure. And so now at the end of that journey, I have to become clean again. I want to become clean and sparkle. This is my interest. So whatever it is you do, if you're interested in it, you'll stick with it and you'll go through all the challenges and have victory. And so if this is what I want to experience my own original highest potential, this is what I need to do. I'll stick with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got something resonating in my head from something someone said, I remember years and years ago at a talk here in Cambridge. You will never be more powerful than when you're being what you really are. And that always sort of struck me, this idea of purity in the sense of nothing mixed in with the self, no alloy mixed in with the self. And therefore that is something that is then a very attractive proposition, that one might have the potential to reach that goal in life, and then be able to approach life and situations and circumstances in a fully resourceful way.
Right.
Yeah. So we're kind of almost at the end of our time this evening with you. I wonder if maybe you could lead us into another meditation experience to bring proceedings to something of a close.
Can I leave people with one more thought? There are many, many people out there now who actually understand that whatever is happening in the world out there, all the events that we are seeing and experiencing, are not just isolated events that happen by chance, but they see it more like an iceberg. So you're seeing 1/10 above the surface, but the 9/10 below the surface isn't visible. But 9/10 below the surface, they are now acknowledging is our thoughts and our feelings and our responses. And if I think about this, I realize I can make a difference to the world. And of course, it's me plus a few others, so that at least there's a minimal number that we reach, the critical mass. But there is a connection between what goes on outside and what goes on inside. And many people haven't understood that. They think that events are just sporadic and spontaneous, and they happen and it's nothing to do with me. Not true. Whatever is going on, it's happening as a direct result of our thoughts, our feelings, our reactions and responses. And so if I take that on board, it's a hugely empowering thing, because I know then that when I change, the world can change too. And so that really gives me hope for the future, that it is in our capacity to do this. We're not helpless creatures being moved as chess pieces by an unseen hand, but we've created whatever's going on, and it's in our capacity to be able to create a new beginning. And so that is my hope for the future.
It's a beautiful sentiment. I mean, so optimism, not just that things will kind of work out, but optimism in the sense that we have within our own grasp the potential and the latent power to really make a positive contribution to bringing about a more optimistic future.
Yeah. It sounded a crazy idea when we were talking about it 50 plus years ago, but now there are very high level people at universities who are propounding this theory, and they're able to explain it with graphs and diagrams and all sorts of things, but it is something that is now understandable and acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, I remember 30 years ago when I first started to do meditation, and I was talking with a guy who was another meditator who also did organizational consulting, same as myself. And he said, oh, you can't talk about this stuff in the workplace. They don't even want to talk about psychology. And just last week, I was listening to a podcast episode with a professor at INSEAD, which is one of the top business schools on the planet, talking about when he works with executives, he doesn't just encourage them to develop self-awareness, but to actually expand their consciousness. So, I mean, that shows how far we've come. That is that's not some, peripheral organization. I mean, this is a mainstream business school, one of the top ones on the planet, advising people that they have to expand their consciousness. I think, yes, it's definitely become mainstream. So perhaps you could take us into a closing meditation and pull some threads together from this evening's conversation.
Sure. Let me go within and find that peace that I am. Om, I am Shanti, peace. Let me feel that. And in this awareness of peace, I feel the presence of the divine. Surrounded by this light and love. I absorb this within myself. And as I do this, the love and the light ignite hope within the soul. And experiencing the power of God's love, there is optimism. I can see myself changing and coming back to the original reality of my own peaceful state, a state filled with blessings, a state filled with the highest qualities. I realize this is my own natural state of being that I had forgotten. And now, connecting with the divine, I see myself, and I also see the future. Whatever upheaval there may be, whatever turmoil is around us, just connecting with the supreme light and my inner compass will continue to guide me so that my conscience and my life work together and reflect each other. Sending out thoughts of God's love and God's peace to my entire human family. I come back to the awareness of the physical dimension. Now filled with peace and love, to be able to share these through my actions here. Thank you. Om Shanti.
Thank you, Sister Jayanti. Wonderful time to spend with you this evening, and I'm sure it's been very beneficial for everyone connected, and people will watch replay as well, of course. Now we have this facility to take advantage of these things over time as well as in real time.